Hi everyone, welcome again to our session in reviewing the structures of English. Come on, let's learn together. This session we are going to talk about clause. What is a clause? A clause is a group of related words. It has subject and a verb, and it may or may not have meaning by itself, depending on its type. So consider the example here. He plays piano. Let us check if is it a group of words? Yes. Does it have subject? Yes, it has he and then the verb play. So therefore the example is an example of a clause. Now a clause has two major types. It could be independent clause and it could be a dependent clause. Now let's have first a dependent clause. A dependent clause is of course a group of related words. It has subject and a verb, and it is a complete sentence. It can be understood by itself. Consider the example here. He plays piano. Is it a group of words? Yes, it is. It has a subject and then a verb. The subject he and then the verb plays. And it is a complete sentence. It can be understood. Now, an independent clause can be separated by a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Just like this one, a compound sentence. He plays piano. He plays piano. The first independent clause separated by comma and then the coordinating conjunction, and the second independent clause. Or it could be separated by a semicolon itself. So we have here the first independent clause separated by the semicolon, and he is good at it as the second independent clause. Or it could be separated by a semicolon and a conjunctive adverb. So you have here he plays piano as the first independent, and this is the semicolon and a conjunctive adverb and the next independent clause. Or it could be separated by a period itself. So you have here to have two sentence. Okay, he plays piano, the first independent or the first sentence, and then he is good at it, the second independent or the second sentence. All the above gives a complete thought by itself. That makes sense in an independent clause. Now let's proceed with a dependent clause. A dependent clause is a group of related words. It has subject and a verb, and it cannot stand by itself. It is only a part of the sentence, and it needs to be attached to the other part of the sentence for it to have a sense. Consider the example here. When he likes. Group of words. It has a subject and then a verb, and it cannot be understood. It needs something for it to have a complete meaning, so let's attach it to an independent clause. Alright, so a dependent clause needs an independent clause for it to have a sense. So let's attach an independent clause. So he plays piano when he likes. This is the independent, and this is now the dependent clause being attached together, and it has now a sense. He plays piano when he likes. Alright? And dependent clauses cannot stand by itself. And there are types of dependent clauses. Dependent clause is also called a subordinate clause, and there are types of subordinate clauses. We have noun clause, we have adjective or relative clause, we have adverb clause, and elliptical clause. Adverb or relative clauses can be a restrictive clause, and it can be a non-restrictive. So these are the types of dependent clauses. Let's have first the noun clause. Of course, it is a group of words. It has a subject and a verb. It is usually introduced with how, if, that, whatever, when, where, whether, which, who, whoever, whom, whomever, whose, and why. It always functions as a noun, particularly a subject. Whoever thought of the idea is a genius. Whoever thought of the idea is a noun clause. It contains the subject whoever and the verb thought. The clause acts as a subject in the sentence. Predicate nominative. The focus of our work is how we can satisfy customers most effectively. How we can satisfy customers most effectively is a noun clause. It contains the subject we and a verb phrase can satisfy. The clause acts as a predicate nominative identifying the word focus. Now, a predicate nominative comes after a linking verb. So you have here the linking verb is direct object. Do you know what the weather will be? What the weather will be is a noun clause. It contains the subject weather and a verb phrase will be. And it is a direct object of the verb know. Now, what is a direct object? A direct object is a noun, pronoun, or group of words that act as a noun and functions as a receiver of action in a sentence. It answers the question whom or what. It comes after a verb. So you have here, what the weather will be is the direct object of the verb know. Or it could be an indirect object. Be sure to send whoever interviewed you a thank you note. Whoever interviewed you is a noun clause. Whoever is the subject and interviewed is the verb. The clause acts as indirect object in the sentence. Now, what is an indirect object? An indirect object is a noun or pronoun or group of words that appears with the direct object and to or for whom the action of the verb is performed. It usually answers the question to whom or for whom, or to what or for what. Object of the prepositions. It's important to think about why we make certain decisions. Why we make certain decisions is a noun clause. It contains the subject we and then the verb make. And the clause is the object of the preposition about. Now let's have the adverb clause. Adverb clause is a group of words. It has a subject and a verb. It modifies an adjective, an adverb, or a verb phrase. An adverb clause begins with the words such as after, although, because, before, if, since, than, until, when, and while. Consider the example. This computer works better than last one did. Than my last one did is an adverb clause. It contains the subject one and then the verb did. The clause modifies the adverb better. Second example. After Tara bought his new car, he took us a ride. After Tara bought his new car is an adverb clause containing the subject Tara and then the verb bought. The clause modifies the verb took. Third example. Dad is worried about driving because the weather has gotten worse. Because the weather has gotten worse is an adverb clause. The weather is the subject, has gotten is the verb phrase. The clause modifies the adjective worried. Now let's proceed with the adjective or relative clause. Adjective clause is also known as relative clause. They are a group of words, it's a subject and a verb. It modifies a noun or a pronoun. They are introduced by words such as relative pronouns and relative adverbs. These types of pronouns and adverbs are referred to as relative because they relate to clauses to the words they modify. That, who, whom, whose, and which are relative pronouns, and where, when, and why are relative adverbs. Consider the examples here. I'm buying a gift for the neighbor who helped me move. Who helped me move is a relative clause. It contains the relative pronoun who, which also functions as the clause's subject, and the verb helped. The clause modifies neighbor. Next example. The play which was debuted last week has been sold out every night. Which was debuted last week is a relative clause or an adjective clause. It contains the pronoun which is also function as the clause's subject and the verb phrase was debuted. The clause modifies the noun play. Now, a relative clause can be a restrictive clause or essential clause if it provides information necessary for identifying the word it modifies. It always begins with the words such as that, when, where, who, whom, whose, which, and why. So example A here is a restrictive clause because who helped me is a restrictive clause because it provides necessary information about the neighbor. Or it could be a non-restrictive clause or a non-essential clause if it provides additional information about a word whose meaning is already clear. It is usually introduced with the word which and set off with commas. So the second example, example B, is an example of non-restrictive clause, which was debuted last week as a non-restrictive clause, or it is non-essential. We can, though it adds additional information about the word that is being modified, but if we are going to delete that in the sentence, if we are going to delete this in the sentence, it will not alter the meaning. The meaning is still the same. The play has been sold out every night. Okay, so this is just making our sentences long. This is called as non-essential clause because we can always remove this one from the sentence and the sentence will be the same, or it has the same meaning. When we remove a non-essential clause from the sentence, it cannot alter its meaning. That's why it is called non-essential clause. Now let's go to the last type of a dependent clause, which is the elliptical clause. An elliptical clause is a type of dependent or subordinate clause that is missing a word or words. And often, the missing part is the verb or the verb phrase. While elliptical clauses are acceptable to use, they can sometimes cause confusion for writers and readers, especially when the sentence ends with a pronoun. So consider the example here. You are just as good at golfing. Now choose what pronoun comes after as. Is it she or her? Teren, it is the she. You are just as good at golfing as she. As she here is an elliptical clause. Why? Because the verb is missing from the end of the clause. Supposedly it should be written as you are just good at golfing as she is. But the verb is missing in the sentence. That makes as she as an elliptical clause. And that missing parts are understood from the context. Okay, without considering the missing verb, if during the time when I asked you, without considering the missing verb, some people might think that her is the correct pronoun to place at the end of the sentence. Am I right? But try pairing her with the verb is and then read the entire clause. Okay, let us try. So you have to put here the pronoun her and then s. Okay, and we have to read, you are just as good at golfing as her is. Okay, this sounds awkward. So the correct pronoun to be used is she, because is understood. The verb is understood in the context. The same example would be, no one works harder than. So choose between she and her. The correct answer is, no one works harder than she, because supposedly we have here the verb works, but it is missing because it is understood in the sentence. So supposedly it should be written as, no one works harder than she works, but works is being deleted from the sentence because it is it is understood based on context. That makes than she as an elliptical clause. Evan is just as excited about seeing the movie. Is it I or me? Okay, some of you would choose me, but the correct answer is I. Okay, Evan is just as excited about seeing the movie as I, because supposedly it has the verb, the linking am here, but am is not written because this is understood from the context. So Evan is just excited about seeing the movie as I. As I is an elliptical clause. Okay, these were the sources. Alright, that's all for today. I hope you understand the lesson and thank you so much for listening. See you again next session. Goodbye.